Our first guest tonight is Maebe A Girl. Maebe was the first drag queen ever elected to public office in the United States when she joined the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council of Los Angeles in 2019. Before LA, Chicago was her home, and she's known for her impressions of Melania Trump, Betsy DeVos, Kellyanne Conway, Sarah Sanders. Whew. She recently announced she'll be running for Congress to succeed Adam Schiff. Let's meet her. But first, here's a video of some of her work.
There is a certain age that you approach when you are a teenager and you've gone through puberty and you're starting to self-actualize and self-realize and figure out who you are. And if you don't have resources, again, you are feeling othered and you're feeling different. And you're feeling like there's something wrong with you. I can speak this way because I was somebody who recognized that I was queer when I was a teenager. And the reason that I promote this idea that we should have LGBTQIA age-appropriate education through all levels of school is because I don't want any other child to feel how I felt going through school, whether it be through adults or my peers.
And these are the books that are being adamantly defended. So, for instance,
well, I'm not defending these books.
Right.
Just to let it be known, I'm not defending these books. There's probably explicit imagery in here that you're going to show me. And
no,
it's the same thing that, well, you might not show them, but whether or not these books have them, there are a lot of right-wing people who are bringing about these books that do have explicit imagery. I don't condone that. I don't think that we should have books for, elementary school students that depict images of people getting blowjobs or having intercourse. I disagree with that. What I agree with is age appropriate, letting people know that queer people exist, that cis heteronormative culture is not the only thing out there. And you yourself might be queer and don't think that there's something wrong with you because it's not everything that you see around you.
You can't change your sex. You can't change your gender.
I disagree with that.
How do you alter your DNA throughout your whole body?
What do you think? In what other context are we describing people based off of their chromosomes? I think the argument for this is an argument intentionally created to be an argument against transgender people, as if we are some freaks of nature trying to fool people. Queer people, trans people, we're actually making this a better world for everybody. We're saying you are welcome to be you as you are. It should be about the greater good for everybody.
Wow. Let's talk to Maebe A Girl. Maebe, come on in.
Hey, Amber. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us tonight. What powerful messages you have. And we're going to get to those messages. But first, how did it all start?
Oh, good question. Good question. Well, I've been involved in drag and politics for quite a while now. I started doing drag in 2015, and I had always had an interest in doing drag. For me, I thought I didn't have the right frame for it. I'm 6'2". I've got broad shoulders. But when I started doing drag, I came to the realization that you don't have to look a certain way or have certain features to be able to do drag. You don't even have to be a certain gender. Drag is just this wonderful art expression. And then I started doing a number of political impersonations, particularly when the Trump administration took over in early 2017. And for me, it was a really powerful tool because I was able to entertain people, but also educate people about some of the atrocities that particular administration was committing against humans. And so after doing this for a while, I started to become known as a political queen. And I thought to myself, well, why can't somebody like me actually be in politics rather than just be a, political commentator or, doing satire? I actually want to be involved in politics itself. So that's when I ran for my local position here in Los Angeles, and I won.
But before that, in Chicago, you were dipping your heels into the political scene too, weren't you?
That's correct. Yeah, I'd considered running for mayor when I lived in Chicago. We started the signature gathering process, and you needed to get, I think, around 12,000 signatures to get on the ballots. We were only able to get about 1,200 at the time. But with a really small team and just a few weeks' work, it was clear that that was not going to happen. So I sort of laid politics to rest for a while until I started doing drag.
So the position that you were elected to, tell me about that. That's not a position that's everywhere in the country.
Correct. Yeah. So I serve on the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council. So in Los Angeles, we essentially have 3 levels of government. We have 1 mayor. We have 15 city council members, which is an extremely low figure for a city of about 4 million people. And then we have 99 neighborhood councils. And the neighborhood councils are the most local form of government. And essentially, the job of neighborhood councils is to act as advisory boards to city councils. So whenever city council is voting on any sort of legislation, our council will vote to either support or oppose that particular legislation. We also do a lot of community work. We authorize neighborhood purpose grants, which are available to local schools and nonprofit organizations. And we're also sort of the punching bag for the neighborhood. So we field a lot of complaints and, help us with these potholes. How do I get information on this? That kind of thing. So a lot of it's fun. A lot of it is not very glamorous, but it's important community work.
Have you been reelected to that position?
I have been. So I was elected in 2019, and I actually just was reelected to my 3rd term. So it's a 2-year term. And I guess I'm the first drag queen elected to public office, but also the first drag queen reelected and reelected again. So it's a pretty cool feeling.
How many people run for that, or how many are on your neighborhood council?
So our particular council, there's 21 members on our particular board. Every single neighborhood council is in many ways self-governing. But has to adhere to the city charter. So some neighborhood councils will have more or less. Ours has 21 members. And as of this new term, I'm actually the most senior member on the board now, and I serve as the treasurer.
Where did you rank in the voting with 21 people?
Out of the 21 people, I tied for 1st place.
Very, very nice. And I said I announced your candidacy to run for Congress, but this isn't the first time you've run for Congress. Tell us when that started.
Yeah, so I decided when I was elected to my local position, for me, it was a really inspiring moment because, I didn't know if I would get any votes. I think that's the big fear of any candidate running the first time, is that you look at the results and there's 1 vote and it's the 1 vote you casted for yourself. So for me, it was really an exciting experience to be elected as I am. I usually get all done up for my meetings and, unapologetically queer about everything. So that was a really inspiring thing for me. And it encouraged me to run for higher office. I thought about running for city council. I thought about running for state assembly, even state senate. But at the time, I was mostly satisfied with my representation. So the only category that I was dissatisfied with was my congressional representative. And so I decided to mount a challenge. And so I ran in 2020. We came in 3rd place out of 8 candidates in 2020, which is a pretty cool, for being a first-time congressional candidate. 2nd time, which was 2022, we did remarkably well. We ended up coming in 2nd place out of 9 candidates, and I moved on to the general election. It was the first time that a trans non-binary person has ever advanced to a general election for a seat in U.S. Congress. And unfortunately, we didn't make it all the way, but it is an open seat coming up in 2024. So considering we came in 2nd place and now the 1st place winner is moving on, I think we have a really great chance of actually making it to Congress.
Now, you said you had some disagreements with the current congressperson there, Adam Schiff. What were some of those disagreements?
So I will tell you, it was really difficult to challenge somebody like Adam Schiff because he is wildly popular on a large scale. He's on MSNBC every week, and a lot of people really appreciate the work that he has done for the Trump impeachments as well as the January 6th committee. That's all work that I applied. But I think for somebody living in the district, he's been my representative since I was 14 years old. I just turned 37 last week. And so I think, first of all, over time, you start to lose touch with what it's like being an everyday person. You lose touch with what it's like to experience not being able to afford rent or things of that nature. And so, but for me, the big things that I really disagree about when it comes to Adam Schiff is he is... a lot of his donors are not the best. He takes a lot of money from defense contractors and weapons manufacturers. And then you take a look at his voting record when it comes to war issues, and he has supported every single war issue since he's been in office in the early 2000s. So, he voted for the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the Saudi invasion of Yemen. And, it's not surprising that he votes for a nearly $1 trillion Pentagon bill every single year. Meanwhile, people are struggling to afford healthcare, housing, education. I think that there are a number of areas where that money could be much better used for, social and community purposes.
At the beginning of the interview, we showed a clip of you being interviewed by someone else. Who was that, and how did that go?
So that was Tim Pool. Tim Pool is I don't think he would describe himself as conservative. I think he would describe himself as a libertarian, but definitely on the conservative side. And he does a show called The Culture War. And they bring on a guest with an opposing point of view and, basically debate for an hour or so. So his team reached out to me and said that they were doing a program on drag culture and drag queen story hour. And they wanted me to be the person speaking in support. Meanwhile, they also brought on another drag queen who is a conservative drag queen, which is a bit of an oxymoron. And so, basically it was almost kind of like 2-on-1 because Tim Pool was the moderator, and then he had this other drag queen on speaking against Drag Queen Story Hour. And it was really interesting because they flew me out to do this podcast, and we filmed it. It was right on the border of Maryland and West Virginia, middle of nowhere. It was on a compound. It was a little bit scary. But I thought that it was really important to go on that show because with a show the scale of his, I knew that if I declined, they were just going to find somebody else to do it. And I felt more than qualified to speak about those issues. Additionally, I was thinking that, with his millions of subscribers, hopefully, just maybe there's a chance that one of them has never actually listened to a drag queen or a trans person. And maybe I will say something that resonates with them and maybe change some hearts and minds. And I actually did receive a number of great messages after doing the program. So ultimately, I achieved that goal.
One of the things I read about you said, drag is what I do, trans is who I am. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. And I will say that's actually a quote that I took from famous drag queen Monica Beverly Hills, who was just on RuPaul's Drag Race All Stars. That's a quote that she says, and it's true. Drag for me and many people, it's more of an occupational thing or maybe a hobby, a special interest. But trans is it's part of your identity. So for me as a non-binary person, I feel I really don't have any limits or constraints to what my appearance will look like. Sometimes I'll look like this, sometimes I'll put on some hair, sometimes I'll put on some makeup, but it's really about the internal self when it comes to trans issues. So a lot of people don't understand that you can be a trans person and a drag performer.
Tell me about your journey becoming trans or acknowledging your trans life.
For me, I think it actually came about, and this is a pretty common experience for a number of trans people, certainly not all trans people, but a number of trans people discover their trans identity through doing drag, or they'll use drag as a way to experiment with their gender in a way that is not necessarily permanent. You don't have to suddenly transition. But, when you start doing drag, you kind of get the feel for what it's like to be, in that sort of mode. For me, I started to realize that after I would do the performances, all of the other girls would be taking off their costumes, their makeup, and their wigs. And for me, I wanted to keep it all on. It felt more like myself than not. So it didn't really feel like a costume. It felt like an actual expression of my gender.
Have you had any issues when you're performing, like it's happening elsewhere in the country, being protested by Proud Boys or the right wing?
Well, fortunately, not at any of my drag events. It certainly has always been in the back of my mind, just when it comes to reasons of safety for myself, for other performers, for patrons. It's a really nutty world and a nutty time that we live in. And so I think just always being cautious about things is important. But I've been fortunate not to have any negative experiences at any of my drag events. However, I did recently get sucked into a little bit of drama involving the Proud Boys. So here in Los Angeles, there's been a number of mass protests at some of the local schools here. So both in LAUSD, which is the Los Angeles Unified School District, as well as GUSD, which is the Glendale Unified School District. Glendale is in some ways a little bit more conservative than most of Los Angeles, but their school board is a pretty progressive school board. And so there's been a lot of protests for very basic things. For instance, in June, they had a meeting to recognize June as Pride Month. Very, very mild. And for some reason, this caused a huge protest. Proud Boys were there, Gays Against Groomers, which is a right-wing group, and just a lot of really bad actors. And so I've been getting a lot of harassment online, and it's been scary for sure. But it's just indicative of what's happening, all across the nation.
Right. We've got a few pictures to show. Russell, would you put a few pictures up, please? Let's look at those. Oh, all right. And was this your first campaign for Silver Lake?
Yeah, this was my first campaign for the Silver Lake Neighborhood Council. I love this image. It brings back some memories.
I like that.
Yeah. So that was our first one. That was actually the night that I was sworn in after being elected. So that was a really cool experience.
Yes.
And this is one of our flyers for this particular election cycle. So it's got, our logo, maybe for Congress, our slogan, which is working for change, neighborhood to nation, and then a number, but not all of our policies.
Wonderful. How is your campaign going?
It's been wonderful. We have had such a great experience. I think especially because we came so close last year, because we made it to the general election. It has been a great experience. It's been an interesting cycle this time because of the fact that it's an open seat. And I knew as soon as I found out that Adam Schiff was running for Senate, I knew everybody and their mother would be entering this race. So there's already 18 people who have signed up to run to replace him. I'm the only Democrat that has run for this particular seat before. So, we're going in with name recognition, having been on the ballot 3 times, primary 2020, primary 2022, and the general election 2022. So, we have a lot of advantages going in. We're doing a lot better this year. Fundraising, we've already raised more money this year than we did in the entire 2022 cycle, up to and including the general election. And the primary is still 7 months out. So we're doing great with fundraising, getting the word out, and I'm really excited. It's going to be a very fun campaign ride.
How much is it going to cost to run for Congress then?
Ooh, that's a $1 million question. $1 million.
Really?
Actually, it's pretty nutty how much money is spent on congressional campaigns. For somebody that is running to represent working class people, I feel terrible asking people for money to, to run for Congress. But unfortunately, it is essential to be able to get, the message out, to be able to get door hangers and send out mailers. We want to get a billboard, maybe do a TV ad. So we're hoping to raise about $200,000. Definitely not there yet, but we are inching our way there.
Getting any national support or any big names jump on your bandwagon yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say our biggest endorsement so far, we've been endorsed by Marianne Williamson, who is running for president. She ran for president in 2020, and she spent a lot of 2022 trying to get progressives elected to the U.S. House and U.S. Senate. So I got to know Marianne Williamson pretty well over the past few years. And when I heard that she was running, she decided to run for president. I saw a lot of similarities between her challenge against Joe Biden with my challenge against Adam Schiff. So you're definitely not always super popular when you decide to run against, an incumbent. But I think that's democracy. When you feel that the needs of your community are not being met by current representation, it is absolutely democratic to, put up a challenge.
All right. You did support Adam when he was running for Congress. Are you supporting him when he's running for Senate?
I am not. I have not fully decided who I'm going to be supporting, but it'll either be Katie Porter or Barbara Lee.
Katie Porter, we can't lose her. We can't lose her voice. I believe I might vote for her if I were in your shoes.
Yeah.
Okay. I mentioned that you do, or you mentioned as well that you do impressions. Can you do any for us?
Not at present, more so because the impersonations I do, they're more like sort of cosplay, makeup impersonations, and I will lip sync to a track. So I'm not the best at actually doing a vocal impersonation. I can only do me.
Totally understand. So if I came to see you, if it said outside that maybe a girl's performing tonight, what would I see in your show?
You would see me and a number of other performers. You would see, we usually, because I do host and produce a weekly drag brunch in West Hollywood, and our cast tends to be, we book a lot of trans performers. We try to book a lot of performers that might not have opportunities at other venues. In terms of the performances that I do, I kind of do, I've got a range. I like to do anything from musicals. Comedy is my big thing. I love to do comedy, whether that be, doing like an impersonation, or I like to sort of connect things and make something funny that wouldn't ordinarily be funny. Hard to pinpoint something right now, but comedy is sort of the big thing. And then I always love to insert a political message. If I can make a statement about universal health care or environmental justice, but still make it entertaining, I'm definitely going to be doing that as well.
Years ago, we created the League of Drag Queen Voters, and our motto is "Don't blow it, vote." And while we don't endorse individual candidates, our main purpose is to get people out there and vote. So I hope people do get out there and vote for you. Maybe great talking to you. We'll talk to you again before the primary because I want to know how the campaign's going, and we'll keep an eye out there for you. And let's show that address one more time if someone wants to connect with Maebe and maybe throw a coin or two. That would be great.
Thank you so much, Amber.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Maebe. And no maybe about it. We're going to have her back.